Change begins the moment you decide your old life no longer deserves to lead your future. This audiobook guides you through 10 daily shifts, rewriting identity patterns, building purpose-driven habits, upgrading beliefs, creating powerful mornings, strengthening discipline, removing hidden distractions, reshaping self-image, transforming your environment, taking bold actions, and tracking growth to lock in evolution. You'll gain clarity, emotional control, confidence, and a renewed sense of direction. Subscribe to Audiobook every day to receive fresh life-changing lessons daily, crafted to elevate your mindset, sharpen your habits, and keep you growing without pause. Number 1. Break identity patterns. Controlling your behavior. Change often begins quietly, long before anyone else notices it. It starts in the small corners of the mind, where old stories echo, shaping actions without asking for permission. The patterns that influence behavior feel natural only because they have been repeated for years, sometimes decades. They form an identity that appears fixed, but nothing about it is permanent. The person you believe yourself to be is simply the collection of choices, reactions, fears, and habits you've practiced until they became familiar. To reinvent yourself in 21 days, the first step is to break these identity patterns, the invisible forces that guide what you do, what you avoid, and how you see your place in the world. Reinvention does not begin with new goals or new routines. It begins with a new relationship with the self. Many people try to change their lives by focusing on the symptoms: procrastination, fear, inconsistency, lack of confidence. But beneath every unwanted behavior sits a deeper narrative about who you think you are. A person who believes they are easily discouraged will behave accordingly. Someone who believes discipline is not their thing will abandon commitments the moment they become uncomfortable. Identity runs the show, often without being questioned. That's why long-term transformation requires stepping back and examining the silent assumptions shaping daily actions. You cannot transform what you refuse to observe. There is a moment in every person's life when they begin to sense that the familiar version of themselves is no longer enough. They feel an internal tension that pushes them toward something stronger, clearer, and more grounded. That moment is not a sign of failure but a sign of evolution. Breaking identity patterns begins when you stop defending who you have been and start considering who you are capable of becoming. The mind gravitates toward what is familiar because familiarity feels safe, even when it limits growth. The challenge is not to become someone entirely new overnight. It is to interrupt old defaults and replace them with deliberate choices. Behavior is often automatic. You respond to stress the same way, approach opportunities with the same hesitation, and repeat the same excuses because the brain seeks efficiency. It follows well-worn paths even when those paths lead to frustration. Reinvention begins by creating new mental routes that lead to strength instead of avoidance, clarity instead of confusion, and discipline instead of emotional impulse. To break identity patterns, you must first observe them without judgment. Notice when you shrink, when you justify, when you delay, when you react without thought. Observation weakens the illusion that these patterns are who you truly are. Once you can see them, you regain the power to reshape them. Identity is reinforced through language. The phrases you repeat: "I'm not good with money," "I always give up," "I'm naturally anxious," become instructions. The mind obeys. Each statement solidifies the walls around your potential. The first step to breaking these patterns is to change the inner dialogue. Replace self-limiting statements with identity-affirming ones rooted in your capacity to evolve. Instead of "I'm inconsistent," shift toward "I am learning to follow through." Instead of "I get overwhelmed easily," shift toward "I handle challenges with increasing strength." These subtle shifts may not feel powerful at first, but identity changes gradually through repeated assertions that reshape how the mind interprets experiences. The Stoics taught that human beings suffer more from their interpretations than the events themselves. That applies deeply here. Much of what limits identity comes from old interpretations of experiences, moments where you felt embarrassed, rejected, misunderstood, or incapable. Those memories become labels. Breaking identity patterns requires revisiting these moments, not to dwell in the past, but to recognize that the old interpretation no longer serves who you are becoming. A setback experienced years ago should not define the boundaries of your present. You are not the same person you were then, and you are under no obligation to carry those limitations forward. One practical method for breaking identity patterns is to challenge your default responses. When discomfort arises, pause before reacting. When fear appears, sit with it instead of running. When your mind whispers an old excuse, recognize it but refuse to act on it. Transformation happens in these small moments of awareness. Each time you break the automatic pattern, you lessen its grip. Each interruption weakens the old identity and strengthens the new one. Another valuable practice is to test your identity through action. Instead of waiting to feel confident, behave as someone confident would. Instead of waiting for motivation, behave as someone disciplined would. Identity is not something you discover, it is something you demonstrate. Every action becomes evidence of the person you are choosing to become. When the evidence changes, the identity changes. Begin with small acts, actions that contradict the old narrative and reinforce the new direction. A person who sees themselves as inconsistent may force themselves to complete one small task every day. A person who thinks they lack courage may take one simple risk daily, even if it's uncomfortable. The goal is not perfection but proof. Breaking identity patterns also requires honesty. Many habits that hold you back survive because they are protected by rationalizations. You may convince yourself that you need the perfect moment to start, or that conditions aren't right, or that you're not ready yet. These explanations soften the discomfort but sabotage growth. Honesty cuts through the excuses and exposes the truth. The old identity is simply comfortable, not correct. Reinvention demands the courage to admit what is no longer acceptable, not as an act of self-criticism but as an act of self-respect. One of the most powerful shifts happens when you begin to separate identity from emotion. Feelings change daily, sometimes hourly. Confidence fluctuates. Motivation rises and falls. Fear appears and disappears. But identity becomes unstable when tied to emotion. You may think, "I'm lazy," simply because you feel tired today, or "I'm not capable" because you feel overwhelmed. Emotions influence behavior, but they are not accurate definitions of who you are. To break identity patterns, learn to view emotions as temporary states, not permanent truths. You can feel fear and still behave bravely. You can feel uncertain and still act decisively. You can feel unmotivated and still maintain discipline. This is where true growth emerges, when you act from principle rather than emotion. Consider the impact of the people around you. Identity is shaped not only by personal beliefs, but by the expectations and attitudes of those you interact with. If you are surrounded by individuals who reinforce your old limitations, breaking identity patterns becomes harder. Creating distance from unhelpful influences and increasing contact with people who embody the qualities you want to develop can dramatically accelerate reinvention. Human beings adopt behaviors, mindsets, and standards from their environment. By altering the influences around you, you create space for a new identity to thrive. Another practical step is to rewrite the narrative you tell about your life. Many people describe themselves through the lens of past pain, failures, or weaknesses. You may say you are someone who struggles with consistency because you have examples that support it. But narrative is powerful. Choosing a new narrative restructures how the mind organizes experiences. A more empowering narrative might be that you are someone who continuously grows, adapts, and learns. Instead of focusing on the moments you gave up, highlight the moments you tried again. Instead of clinging to old mistakes, recognize the strength required to move beyond them. When the inner narrative shifts, the behavioral patterns begin to shift with it. To accelerate this transformation, create daily identity checkpoints. At the end of each day, reflect briefly on your actions. Ask yourself whether your behavior aligned with the identity you want to embody. If it did, acknowledge it. If it didn't, adjust without guilt. This daily reflection builds awareness and reinforces consistency. It helps the new identity take root through deliberate attention. Breaking identity patterns is not about rejecting who you are. It is about releasing what no longer serves your growth. Every person carries untapped potential waiting beneath layers of doubt, habit, and outdated beliefs. Reinvention is the process of clearing away those layers to reveal a version of yourself grounded in strength, clarity, and intention. Over the next 21 days, the identity shift will unfold step by step as you replace old patterns with purposeful action. Change doesn't require dramatic moments or intense breakthroughs. It requires presence, repetition, and the willingness to challenge the familiar. Every time you choose awareness over habit, courage over avoidance, and discipline over impulse, you reshape the foundation of who you are. Breaking identity patterns is the beginning of this journey, the moment where the past stops deciding your future. The power to reinvent yourself has always belonged to you. This is the chapter where you begin using it deliberately, shaping a new identity that reflects who you are becoming rather than who you've been. Number 2. Design new habits aligned with purpose. Purpose becomes the compass that steadies your direction when life grows noisy and uncertain. It clarifies what deserves your energy and what no longer deserves space in your days. Designing new habits begins with this internal compass. Without purpose, habits become obligations that fade as quickly as they begin. With purpose, they transform into anchors, steady, necessary, and meaningful. When habits align with a clear why, discipline feels less like force and more like commitment. Each action becomes part of a larger mission rather than a random act, squeezed into an already crowded life. Many people attempt to build new habits by copying what others do, believing that success lies in adopting the routines of those who appear accomplished. But habits should be crafted from the inside out. A routine that works for one person may drain another if the underlying purpose is unclear. The mind resists tasks that feel empty, yet it willingly endures discomfort for something meaningful. A person can push themselves through temporary motivation, but purpose sustains long-term consistency. Before attempting to install new habits, pause and understand what matters most to your growth. Consider the direction you want your life to move toward and the person you want to become. This clarity simplifies everything. Purpose does not have to be complicated. It can be as direct as wanting to strengthen discipline, deepen emotional resilience, increase peace, or elevate your contribution to the world. Once this intention becomes clear, habits serve as the daily evidence of your commitment. Think of each habit as a small investment, placed consistently, building toward a larger future. Nothing changes all at once, but everything changes eventually when the right actions are repeated with intention. To design purposeful habits, start by defining the identity you want to embody. You are not merely creating actions, you are shaping the qualities you want to represent. For example, if you want to be someone who operates with clarity, a daily habit may involve quiet reflection or journaling. If you want to embody strength, a habit may involve physical training or mental discipline. If you want to be someone who lives with intention, a habit may involve planning your day before it begins. These actions may appear small, but they carry great weight because they represent alignment. Every habit should serve who you are becoming, not who you have been. A powerful principle is to design habits that are simple to begin, yet meaningful enough to matter. Overly ambitious routines collapse under their own weight. The goal is not to overwhelm yourself with intensity, but to create rhythm. A strong rhythm eventually expands into larger momentum. A person trying to read 1 hour a day may struggle, but committing to 10 minutes builds consistency without resistance. Once the habit becomes part of your identity, you can expand it naturally. Purposeful habits grow with you. They don't demand perfection, they demand continuation. Another key is to attach habits to existing behaviors. Human beings follow patterns throughout their days, even without realizing it. You wake up, check your phone, prepare your routine, complete tasks in certain sequences. These patterns create opportunities. By linking a new habit to an established one, you make the transition smoother. After waking, you might take 2 minutes to breathe deeply. After finishing a meal, you might reflect on your energy levels. After completing work, you might read a few pages to regain mental clarity. This method reduces friction and increases consistency, because it rides the momentum of what you already do. Purposeful habits also require boundaries. Without boundaries, distractions quickly dilute your focus. The world constantly pulls at your attention, offering shortcuts, noise, and temptations that drain energy. When you know your purpose, boundaries become easier to set. You no longer accept every request, entertain every impulse, or say yes out of guilt. Your habits become protected because they support your future. You begin to understand that every moment invested in your purpose strengthens your foundation, while every moment spent in aimless distraction weakens it. Boundaries are not barriers, they are declarations of what truly matters. Designing new habits requires understanding that action comes before motivation. Many people wait for inspiration, hoping for the perfect moment to begin. But the truth is simple. Action generates the feeling people hope will precede it. When you start, even small steps build momentum. The brain rewards completion, and that reward encourages repetition. Over time, consistency becomes easier because your identity begins to shift. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to form new habits. You begin to see yourself as someone who lives with intention. The habit stops feeling foreign and becomes part of your natural rhythm. Another important aspect is emotional neutrality. Habits aligned with purpose will still face days of resistance. Your mind will offer excuses, your energy will fluctuate, and your circumstances will occasionally challenge your routine. Purposeful habits thrive when you stop negotiating with emotions and simply follow the action. You are not required to enjoy every step, you are required to honor your direction. Over time, the emotional resistance decreases because the habit becomes automatic. Discipline grows stronger when you treat it as a practice rather than a feeling. An effective approach for building purposeful habits is to create a small daily challenge that reinforces your chosen identity. This challenge could involve improving your physical strength, enhancing your focus, developing emotional control, or sharpening your intellect. Choose something that stretches you slightly, but remains achievable. Consistent challenges train the mind to embrace growth rather than fear it. They create an internal pattern of progress that becomes addictive in the best way. The goal is not intensity but direction. Reflection plays an essential role in habit design. At the end of the day, take a moment to review your actions. Did you honor your purpose? Did you follow your habits? Did you deviate? And if so, why? Reflection transforms experiences into lessons. It weakens excuses and strengthens awareness. It helps you adjust your habits to better fit your needs. Without reflection, habits can become mechanical and lose meaning. With reflection, they become conscious expressions of your intention. Consider the long-term benefit of each habit you choose. Purpose helps you see beyond the present moment. A habit may feel insignificant today, but over months or years, it can transform your entire life. The person who reads daily becomes someone others rely on for insight. The person who trains their body becomes someone who navigates stress with strength. The person who practices clarity becomes someone who makes decisions with confidence. Purpose reveals the long-term rewards hidden inside small actions. When you see these rewards clearly, commitment becomes natural. It is important to design habits that respect your humanity. You are not a machine, and expecting flawless execution leads to frustration. You will have days where external events disrupt your plans or your energy feels lower than usual. The goal is not unbroken perfection, but unwavering return. Purposeful habits remain flexible enough to adapt without losing direction. Even on difficult days, you can perform a simplified version of your habit to maintain continuity. This reinforces the identity of someone who remains consistent even in adversity. Finally, designing habits aligned with purpose invites a deeper sense of peace. Life becomes less chaotic when choices reflect intention. You feel grounded because your actions match your values. You feel progress because your days carry meaning. You feel strength because your habits shape you into someone capable and focused. Purpose does not remove challenges, but it gives you the clarity needed to overcome them. New habits are not just tasks, they are bridges to a stronger version of yourself. When each habit aligns with a meaningful purpose, you move through your days with direction, courage, and stability. Over 21 days, these habits will take root, but their impact will stretch far beyond this period. What begins as small daily actions eventually becomes a lifestyle shaped by intention rather than impulse. Purpose becomes your silent guide, and your habits become proof that transformation is not only possible, but inevitable when aligned with something meaningful. Number 3. Replace limiting beliefs with stronger convictions. Limiting beliefs often form quietly, long before you realize they are shaping your life. They settle into the mind through early experiences, emotional moments, and repeated failures that were never examined with clarity. Over time, these beliefs become internal rules, directing how you think, what you attempt, and how much of your potential you allow yourself to access. They operate in the background like hidden codes, influencing decisions without asking for your permission. To reinvent yourself, these silent barriers must be replaced with convictions that reflect strength, capability, and forward movement. The shift begins not with dramatic change but with honest awareness of what you've been telling yourself for years. A limiting belief gains power when you accept it as truth. It convinces you that certain opportunities are out of reach, that you are not ready, or that some goals are meant for someone stronger, smarter, or more fortunate. These beliefs can be subtle, often disguised as practicality or caution. You may tell yourself you're not a confident person, not disciplined enough, not able to handle pressure, or not the type who succeeds consistently. Yet these statements are not facts. They are conclusions drawn from old situations interpreted through fear, rather than wisdom. They feel accurate because the mind prefers patterns, even painful ones, over uncertainty. Replacing limiting beliefs requires examining them with honesty. Start by asking yourself where these ideas originated. Was it a past failure that left a mark? Was it someone else's voice that became your own? Was it an experience from childhood that was never reinterpreted with adult understanding? When you trace a belief back to its source, it begins to lose its authority. Many long-held assumptions crumble when exposed to the truth that they were formed under conditions that no longer define your present. You are not the same person you were when those beliefs first took root. Growth has happened quietly in the background, and you must allow yourself to acknowledge that. To build stronger convictions, begin with the understanding that beliefs are choices, not sentences. You can decide what you want to believe about your capabilities, your potential, and your direction. This is not about blind optimism, but about reclaiming the power to define your identity. A strong conviction does not ignore reality. It guides how you navigate it. It becomes a stable foundation, especially when life becomes demanding. Convictions give structure to your actions because they represent principles rather than reactions. One effective method to replace limiting beliefs is through reframing. A limiting belief often presents itself in absolute terms. For example, "I fail at new things" can be reframed into "I learn through experience, and every attempt strengthens me." "I'm not good at speaking" becomes "I am improving my communication each time I practice." These adjustments may appear small, but they completely shift how the mind perceives challenges. A limiting belief closes doors. A stronger conviction opens them. Another powerful approach is collecting evidence that contradicts the old belief. The mind will always find proof of what it expects to see. If you expect yourself to struggle, you will notice every difficulty. If you expect progress, you will notice every improvement. Begin tracking small moments where you act with courage, clarity, or strength. These moments accumulate and gradually form new inner truths. Confidence is not built through dramatic wins. It is built through consistent acknowledgement of growth. The more evidence you gather, the harder it becomes for limiting beliefs to survive. Replacing limiting beliefs also requires emotional discipline. Many of these beliefs were formed during moments of fear, embarrassment, or disappointment. When similar emotions appear in the present, the old belief resurfaces, trying to protect you from discomfort. Instead of reacting automatically, practice observing the emotion without attaching meaning to it. Fear does not always signal danger. Sometimes it signals expansion. Doubt does not indicate incapability. It indicates unfamiliar territory. When you stop interpreting uncomfortable emotions as warnings, you gain the freedom to act even when the mind is unsettled. Convictions grow through repetition, much like habits. You cannot expect a new belief to become strong after one declaration. You must reinforce it daily through action. Every step that reflects your new conviction strengthens its roots. If you want to believe you are capable, act in ways that demonstrate capability, even in small tasks. If you want to believe you can remain calm under pressure, practice moments of stillness when challenges arise. Convictions are built through lived experience. They become unshakable when your behavior affirms them repeatedly. It is also important to challenge the language you use when speaking to yourself. Words influence identity. A person who constantly tells themselves they can't, won't, or never do well creates a mental cage. Replacing limiting beliefs requires replacing limiting language. Speak to yourself with firmness, not softness. Speak with direction, not hesitation. You do not need poetic affirmations. You need clear, grounded statements that reinforce strength. I adapt quickly. I stay focused. I overcome difficulty. I grow through challenges. Words shape thought. Thought shapes behavior. And behavior shapes identity. Surrounding yourself with the right influences can accelerate the shift. Limiting beliefs often survive because they are mirrored by the environment. When you interact with people who reinforce negativity or low expectations, your beliefs adapt to match their vision instead of your own. Seek conversations, content, and environments that reflect the mindset you want to develop. Exposure shapes belief more powerfully than most people realize. A single conversation with someone who believes in progress can weaken years of self-doubt. Choose your influences with intention. Replacing limiting beliefs requires a willingness to see yourself differently. Many people hold tightly to their limitations because they feel familiar. There is a strange comfort in believing you are incapable. It removes responsibility. But in truth, it also removes freedom. Growth demands that you let go of the identity that has protected you but also restricted you. There is courage in acknowledging that your potential is greater than your patterns. Reinvention begins when you stop defining yourself by past versions of who you used to be. As you strengthen new convictions, you will begin noticing subtle shifts. Decisions become clearer. Opportunities feel more accessible. Challenges feel less intimidating. The world does not change, but your perception does. You begin to trust yourself, not blindly, but through evidence built from consistent action. You create a new internal standard for how you show up. This standard becomes the backbone of the identity you are shaping during these. Replacing limiting beliefs is not about pretending life is easy. It is about refusing to live smaller than your capability. It is about choosing thoughts that elevate rather than weaken you. It is about building a foundation of conviction strong enough to support the life you want to create. When these convictions take root, you no longer shrink at the first sign of discomfort. You move forward with clarity because you trust your direction. The mind will always return to its old patterns unless you consciously guide it. But with repetition, intention, and conviction, a new mental framework forms, one that reflects resilience, confidence, and self-mastery. Limiting beliefs lose their power when you refuse to accept them as truths. Stronger convictions rise when you honor your potential and act in alignment with the person you are becoming. Reinvention becomes inevitable when you give your mind new truths to obey. Number 4. Create morning rituals that reset mindset. Morning rituals are the quiet architects of your inner world. They shape the tone, energy, and clarity you carry into the rest of your day. The mind, when first awakened, is at its most impressionable state. Thoughts form more easily, emotions settle more quickly, and direction can be established with almost no resistance. This is why the first hour of the day is powerful. It offers a clean mental slate, untouched by demands, noise, or expectations. When you choose intentional rituals, you train your mind to meet the day with strength rather than react to it in confusion. A morning ritual is not a routine you force. It is a practice you choose to honor because it resets your mindset. Many people wake up and step immediately into stress. They check their phone, scroll through distractions, or think about problems before they even take their first breath. This habit instantly pulls the mind into a reactive state. A reactive morning creates a reactive life. But when you start your day with calm, clarity, and direction, everything afterward feels more manageable. Challenges lose their chaos. Thoughts become steadier. Decisions become cleaner. Even your emotions sit more peacefully within you. Creating a morning ritual begins with understanding what the mind needs to reset itself. The mind needs stillness, focus, and a sense of personal control. It needs space before it faces the world. The moment you wake up, give yourself permission to be present. Do not rush. Do not jump into obligations. Allow your mind to settle into awareness. This small moment of presence reminds you that you set the tone of your day, not the outside world. One of the most powerful ways to reset your mindset each morning is to breathe with intention. A few slow breaths calm the nervous system and clear the mental fog that lingers from sleep. It's not about practicing deep meditation or mastering complex breathing techniques. It is simply about grounding yourself. When you breathe deliberately, You tell your mind that you are in control. This quiet act prepares you to think from stability rather than haste. Even 30 seconds of intentional breathing can shift the entire emotional landscape of your morning. Another essential element of a morning ritual involves giving your mind something purposeful to focus on. The thoughts you entertain in the first hour tend to shape the rest of the day. Instead of letting the mind drift into worry, give it direction. You might choose a principle to guide your day: patience, discipline, kindness, or focus. You might choose a single intention that reflects how you want to show up. This is not about trying to force positivity. It is about choosing clarity. When you select a guiding thought, you anchor your actions to something steady. Movement is also an important part of resetting the mindset. It doesn't have to be intense. Even small physical actions awaken the brain, improve circulation, and lift mental fog. Stretching, walking, or light exercise signals that the body is ready to meet the day with energy. Movement also builds momentum. When you move early in the morning, discipline becomes easier because you have already taken control of your physical state. Small movement creates an internal spark that carries forward into your mental state as well. Morning rituals become even more powerful when you incorporate reflection. This is the time to observe your thoughts without judgment. Reflection is not about analyzing every issue. It is about acknowledging the emotional tone you woke up with. Some mornings feel heavier, others feel clearer. Reflection teaches you to meet yourself where you are without being controlled by temporary emotions. A brief moment of reflection allows you to understand your inner climate before the world influences it. When you understand what you're feeling, you navigate your day with more stability. Writing in the morning can also reset your mindset. Putting thoughts onto paper clears mental clutter. It gives your mind structure, helping you separate what matters from what doesn't. You can write your priorities, your inner thoughts, or your intentions for the day. There is power in seeing your mind on paper. It turns chaos into clarity. Even a few sentences can create focus. Writing becomes a mirror, showing you what needs attention and what can be let go. This simple act removes mental noise before it has a chance to overwhelm you. Another key part of creating morning rituals is embracing silence. Silence is often underestimated, yet it is one of the most restorative forces for the mind. In silence, you can hear your thoughts without distortion. You can sense your direction without confusion. Many people fill their mornings with noise, music, notifications, conversations, but silence can give you a level of calm that nothing else can. Even a few minutes of quiet can create an inner stillness that strengthens you throughout the day. A morning ritual also benefits from gratitude, not as a forced practice, but as a grounding one. Gratitude shifts your attention away from scarcity. It reminds you that even in difficulty, there is something steady within you. Gratitude softens tension and brings perspective. It does not erase challenges, but it changes the posture with which you face them. When you begin your day acknowledging something meaningful, your mind gains balance. Gratitude resets emotional patterns that often try to pull you into stress early in the morning. Consistency strengthens your morning ritual. The mind thrives on patterns. When you repeat a ritual daily, it becomes automatic. You won't have to think about it. Your mind will seek it. Over time, your morning becomes a sanctuary rather than a rushed transition into stress. Even on difficult days, your ritual will act as a stabilizing force. It becomes a source of strength that prepares you for whatever the day brings. Your morning ritual does not have to be complicated. It can be simple, peaceful, and flexible. You might choose to breathe, reflect, move, write, or sit in silence. You might choose one or several of these elements. The goal is to design a ritual that resets your mindset and restores your clarity. The ritual should feel like a grounding moment that belongs to you alone. When you honor your morning, you reclaim your day. You step into life with intention instead of reactivity. A powerful shift happens when you stop seeing your mornings as a rushed blur and start treating them as a foundation. Each day becomes an opportunity to create alignment within yourself. Every morning becomes a chance to choose calm over chaos, clarity over confusion, and presence over distraction. Your mindset becomes steadier, your emotions more grounded, and your decisions more deliberate. Morning rituals reshape your inner world. They create a space where your mind resets, your emotions stabilize, and your direction becomes clear. They transform the first moments of your day into a powerful anchor that supports every action that follows. Over time, you begin to feel different, not because life has changed, but because you have changed how you enter it. Your mornings become the quiet strength behind your growth, guiding you steadily toward the person you are becoming. Number 5. Build discipline through micro daily commitments. Discipline rarely arrives in one dramatic moment. It grows quietly in the background of your days, shaped by the smallest choices you repeat without fanfare. The structure you crave is built from actions so small they seem almost insignificant, yet these tiny actions are precisely what rewire your identity. Each micro-commitment you honor whispers to your mind that you are capable, reliable, and willing to follow through. Even when no one is watching, these simple decisions accumulate into a force that shifts the entire direction of your life. Discipline is not about rigid perfection, it's about proving to yourself repeatedly that movement matters more than momentum. The most powerful micro-commitments are the ones so simple you cannot refuse them. Instead of promising an hour of intense effort, you begin with a couple of minutes directed toward the goal you want to strengthen. This approach disarms resistance and removes the emotional friction that often sabotages ambition. When the mind cannot argue with the task gets done. That tiny completion builds trust, and a person who trusts their own actions becomes unstoppable. You begin to notice that consistency creates more transformation than intensity ever has. Every micro-commitment is a message to your future self. A short reading session tells your mind that growth matters. A 2-minute stretch signals that your health is a priority. A single page of writing confirms that creativity deserves space in your life. These actions do not need to be loud to be meaningful. They need to be repeated. Repetition is the key that welds new patterns into your identity. You evolve not because you try to become someone else, but because you consistently choose behaviors aligned with the version of yourself you aspire to be. Discipline becomes infinitely easier when you shrink your commitments to the smallest actionable unit. Your brain feels less pressure, your emotions feel less overwhelmed, and your habits become easier to maintain. The moment you master the art of breaking tasks into microscopic steps, you remove the most common barrier to progress, the belief that everything must be done at once. This belief is what exhausts people before they even begin. Micro-commitments free you from that burden and allow discipline to grow naturally, without force. What often surprises people is how quickly small actions shape self-perception. You may start with something as unassuming as drinking a glass of water as soon as you wake up, but over time that one behavior reminds you that you honor your well-being. You might commit to organizing your space for 2 minutes, and that tiny act gradually shifts how you view your environment. When you repeatedly choose alignment over comfort, identity begins to solidify around the habit of follow-through. You no longer tell yourself you'll try, you tell yourself you'll. To build discipline through micro-commitments, you must learn to silence the inner judge that expects massive achievements after minimal effort. That voice creates pressure, and pressure creates avoidance, but small actions bypass that pattern entirely. There is nothing intimidating about one push-up, one sentence, one mindful breath, and yet these simple things unlock momentum, and momentum unlocks belief. Once belief enters the equation, discipline becomes a natural extension of how you operate. You act not because you feel forced to, but because you feel aligned. You don't need motivation every day to follow micro-commitments. You only need a willingness to do the minimum. The magic is that the minimum often leads you into doing more than you planned. Folding one shirt becomes organizing the entire drawer. Writing one paragraph becomes completing a full page. Taking a brief walk becomes a longer session because you feel the benefits. Micro-commitments lure you into progress by lowering the barrier to entry. They become the foundation that carries you through days when motivation is nowhere to be found. As you practice these tiny commitments, you start to notice less internal resistance. The mind no longer panics when a task appears. You develop a relationship with action that feels stable and predictable. Because you consistently show up, even in small ways, you eradicate the identity of someone who waits for the right moment. You become a person who moves, a person who creates, a person who tries, even when the effort is small. This shift is pivotal because discipline is an identity, not an event. The more you honor micro-commitments, the more confidence expands. You start to believe in your ability to handle larger challenges because you've witnessed your reliability in smaller ones. This belief becomes a psychological anchor that keeps you grounded. When life becomes chaotic, you still have your tiny habits, your 2-minute reset moments that remind you of your direction. Discipline developed in small doses becomes nearly unshakable. You no longer collapse under pressure because your identity is fortified through consistent action. Every day gives you a chance to reaffirm who you're becoming. Your micro-commitments act like small signatures on the contract you've made with your own evolution. They do not drain you. They nourish you. They preserve your energy while helping you move forward. And as the days stack up, you start noticing that the world around you responds differently to you. Opportunities appear, clarity increases, and you experience a growing sense of self-respect. This transformation doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you have chosen the path of steady reinforcement over dramatic bursts of effort. When you fully embrace micro-commitments, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a rhythm. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop creating excuses. Instead, you operate from a place of calm consistency, where the question is never, "Can I do this?" but "What is the smallest version of this that I can do right now?" This mindset is powerful because it ensures progress every single day. And daily progress, no matter how small, compounds into extraordinary results. Through micro-commitments, you realize you don't need to overhaul your life to change its direction. You need consistent signals sent to your mind that reinforce who you want to become. Those signals accumulate into habits, and those habits form the backbone of your discipline. This is how you move from intention to embodiment, one small action at a time. Number 6. Remove distractions, blocking your self-transformation. Distractions don't always show up as loud interruptions. Often they creep in quietly, disguised as harmless habits, subtle temptations, and tiny detours that gradually pull you away from the person you want to become. Transformation requires clarity, and clarity struggles to survive in an environment overflowing with noise. When your attention is scattered, your energy leaks into places that offer nothing in return. The first step towards self-transformation is reclaiming the mental space that distractions have occupied for too long. Once you begin removing what pulls you away from your direction, you finally make room for what pulls you toward it. You start noticing that many distractions aren't accidental. They've become patterns built from comfort, familiarity, and avoidance. It's easier to scroll than reflect, easier to multitask than focus, and easier to chase stimulation than face discomfort. But every distraction carries a cost you rarely acknowledge. It takes time from your goals, fragments your thoughts, and weakens your commitment to change. When you remove even one major distraction, you instantly feel a shift in your inner rhythm. There is a sudden spaciousness inside you, a sense that your mind is no longer hijacked by impulses you didn't consent to. To remove distractions effectively, you must understand the role they play. Some distractions numb stress. Some mask boredom. Others help you avoid responsibility or silence unwanted emotions. When you recognize the purpose behind each distraction, you can choose a healthier alternative instead of surrendering to the same automatic behaviors. You take back the steering wheel of your choices instead of reacting from habit. This is the moment transformation begins, when you no longer allow your attention to be dictated by impulse. Your environment often contributes more to your distractions than your mind does. Physical spaces stuffed with clutter generate mental static. Notifications that pop up without permission train your brain to expect constant interruption. People who drain your energy keep you in cycles that never allow growth. Removing these distractions isn't an act of isolation, it's an act of preservation. You're protecting the mental real estate needed to create a stronger, more disciplined version of yourself. Rearranging your surroundings becomes a powerful declaration that your goals matter more than momentary indulgences. There is a form of distraction that hides behind productivity tasks that feel important, but do nothing to move you forward. You stay busy yet stagnant. You feel active yet unfulfilled. This type of distraction is dangerous because it disguises itself as progress. Removing it requires honesty. You must ask yourself which tasks actually build the life you want, and which simply fill time. The moment you strip away unnecessary obligations, your days start to align with your highest priorities. Your schedule becomes a reflection of who you're becoming, not who you've been. Distractions thrive on impulse, so the more you train yourself to pause, the less power they hold. That pause may only last a few seconds, but in those seconds, you reclaim your agency. You remember your goals. You remember your values. You remember the commitment you made to transform. This pause becomes a shield against the temptations that previously derailed you. Your choices gain intention, and each intentional choice strengthens your identity. You shift from reacting to responding, from drifting to directing, from consuming to creating. A key strategy for removing distractions is establishing boundaries with your time. Time is your most irreplaceable resource, yet distractions steal it in small increments until entire days disappear. When you set boundaries, you're not limiting yourself, you're protecting your focus. You decide when to engage, when to disconnect, when to rest, and when to create. You become selective about what receives your attention because you understand that every moment spent on distraction is a moment taken from your possible future. Boundaries become the architecture of your transformation. Distractions also weaken discipline by triggering emotional loops that keep you stuck. You may check your phone when you feel lonely, snack when you feel stressed, or binge entertainment when you feel overwhelmed. Removing distractions means addressing the emotional triggers they hide behind. Once you learn to deal with those emotions directly, the distractions lose their control over you. You stop soothing yourself with habits that sabotage your growth. Instead, you build emotional resilience that supports your transformation at every stage. Your inner world becomes sharper when you eliminate distractions. Thoughts become clearer. Decisions become easier. Actions become more aligned. This internal clarity amplifies your ability to change because you're no longer fighting through layers of noise to hear your own voice. You can finally recognize what feels right, what feels wrong, and what feels necessary. Distractions blur these signals. Removing them strengthens them. You start trusting yourself more because you can finally hear the guidance coming from within you. The absence of distractions creates space for deeper self-awareness. Without constant noise, you notice your own tendencies. You observe how your mind behaves when it's not overstimulated. You discover which activities nourish you and which drain you. This awareness is crucial because you cannot transform without understanding yourself. When distractions dominate your life, they steal opportunities for reflection. When you remove them, reflection becomes natural. You begin to see patterns you've never noticed, and once you see them, you can change them. Removing distractions isn't about perfection. It's about direction. You will still encounter interruptions, temptations, and unexpected detours, but you handle them differently. You no longer allow them to dominate your day or dictate your choices. You learn to refocus quickly, returning to your path with ease. Every time you choose focus over distraction, you reinforce a new identity, an identity built on purpose, clarity, and inner strength. This identity becomes the engine that drives your transformation. As your life becomes less cluttered, your progress accelerates. You have more mental space to think, more emotional space to grow, and more physical space to act. Energy that once leaked into distractions is now channeled into your development. You feel momentum building, not because you're working harder, but because you've removed the forces that once held you back. Transformation becomes simpler, faster, and more sustainable because your environment and mindset finally support the changes you're making. Every distraction that once controlled you becomes powerless the moment you decide you deserve more clarity, more peace, and more growth. You step into a new version of yourself, one that values attention as a precious asset. And with that newfound attention, you begin building the life you've always wanted, one focused, intentional choice at a time. Number 7. Reprogram self-image using mental repetition. The way you see yourself shapes every decision you make, every boundary you set, every opportunity you pursue, and every action you avoid. Self-image is the silent architect behind your behavior, guiding you without announcing its presence. When your self-image is limited, your life becomes limited. When your self-image expands, your possibilities expand with it. Transformation begins the moment you choose to rebuild the way you perceive your own identity. This reconstruction doesn't happen through wishful thinking or temporary motivation. It happens through steady mental repetition that reshapes the beliefs you've carried for years. Most people underestimate the power of repeated thoughts. A belief is simply a thought rehearsed enough times that it feels like truth. If the repeated thoughts are negative, the belief becomes restrictive. If the repeated thoughts are empowering, the belief becomes liberating. You can't change your life without changing the internal script you've been reciting to yourself. That script influences how you handle challenges, how you respond to criticism, how you treat your goals, and how you carry yourself in moments of uncertainty. Reprogramming that script requires intentional practice because your mind naturally returns to familiar stories even when those stories no longer serve you. Mental repetition works not by forcing confidence, but by cultivating identity. Instead of telling yourself who you want to be someday, you speak as the person you are becoming today. When repeated consistently, those thoughts begin to feel natural rather than aspirational. Your mind adapts to the new narrative because it craves consistency. The internal identity you feed it becomes the identity it strives to maintain. This is why mental repetition is so powerful. The mind aligns with whatever it hears the most, regardless of whether those messages are empowering or self-destructive. To reprogram your self-image, begin by identifying the beliefs you've unknowingly rehearsed for too long. These beliefs often hide in your automatic reactions. They show up when you turn down an opportunity, hesitate to speak up, or avoid pursuing something meaningful. They whisper that you're not ready, not capable, not deserving, or not strong enough. Once you recognize these beliefs, you strip them of their power. Awareness turns the spotlight on them, and under that light, they lose their authority. From there, you plant new beliefs through deliberate repetition, beliefs that support the direction you want your life to take. This repetition must be precise and intentional. The mind doesn't respond well to vague statements. It responds to concrete identity-based thoughts that reinforce capability, resilience, and purpose. When you repeatedly remind yourself that you are disciplined, your actions begin aligning with discipline. When you affirm that you are growing, your choices begin shaping growth. When you declare that you handle challenges with clarity, your responses become calmer and more measured. These are not empty words. They are seeds that through repetition take root in your subconscious. Your tone during mental repetition matters. Thoughts spoken with conviction carry far more weight than thoughts whispered with doubt. You don't need to shout. You simply need to speak with certainty. Certainty gives the mind something solid to anchor itself to. Over time, the old narrative weakens because it no longer receives reinforcement. Just as a muscle atrophies when unused, limiting beliefs lose strength when you stop feeding them. Reprogramming your self-image also requires consistency in behavior. Mental repetition sets the foundation, but action cements the structure. Even small actions aligned with your new identity deepen the belief that the new version of you is real. When your behavior reflects the thoughts you've been repeating, the mind embraces the transformation with greater ease. The more you behave like the person you're becoming, the harder it becomes for your mind to cling to old labels that no longer match your actions. Because self-image is shaped gradually, patience becomes an essential part of the process. Your mind has stored years of experiences, interpretations, and memories that reinforced your previous identity. It may resist change because familiarity feels safe, but mental repetition softens that resistance by introducing a steady stream of new internal evidence. Each repeated thought becomes a subtle reminder that the past does not define the future. Over time, your self-image begins to shift from an outdated snapshot to a dynamic, evolving understanding of your potential. Another powerful element of mental repetition is visualization. When you see yourself acting with confidence, discipline, clarity, or purpose, you build a mental blueprint that guides your behavior. The brain responds to imagery almost the same way it responds to real experiences. By repeatedly visualizing yourself as the person you aim to become, you help your mind internalize that identity. This makes the transition feel natural rather than forced. Visualization aligns your emotions with your intentions, making your new self-image emotionally believable. Part of reprogramming your self-image involves releasing the labels others have placed on you. Throughout life, you absorb countless judgments, some subtle, some direct. These judgments often become embedded in your sense of self without your awareness. Mental repetition allows you to replace those inherited labels with intentional ones. You stop defining yourself by past mistakes old relationships, or outdated expectations. You claim the right to shape your own identity rather than accepting whatever was handed to you. This freedom is one of the most powerful aspects of transformation. As your self-image strengthens, your behavior shifts effortlessly. You no longer need to push yourself to act differently because your new identity naturally directs your choices. You focus more easily. You recover from setbacks more quickly. You handle uncertainty with greater composure. You make decisions from a place of self-trust rather than fear. People often believe motivation drives change, but in truth, identity drives motivation. When you see yourself as capable, you behave capably. When you see yourself as committed, you follow through. When you see yourself as evolving, you continue to grow. The more you repeat empowering thoughts, the more your inner dialogue transforms. That internal voice, the one narrating your days, evaluating your actions, and interpreting your experiences, becomes calmer, wiser, and more supportive. Instead of criticizing every mistake, it learns to analyze without attacking. Instead of predicting failure, it encourages persistence. Instead of comparing you to others, it brings your focus back to your own path. This shift in inner dialogue becomes one of the strongest indicators that your self-image is evolving. Ultimately, mental repetition is an act of self-respect. It's a declaration that you refuse to be defined by doubt, hesitation, or outdated beliefs. You give yourself permission to grow, to rise, and to redefine what you're capable of. Over time, the repetition becomes less about forcing a new identity and more about reinforcing the truth of who you're becoming. Your self-image becomes steady, resilient, and aligned with your goal. And as your inner identity strengthens, your outer world begins to reflect that strength in ways you once thought impossible. Number 8. Upgrade environment to support new identity. Every identity shift requires a supportive environment, because no matter how strong your intentions are, the space you live in can either reinforce your growth or quietly pull you back into old patterns. The surroundings you choose communicate messages to your mind, even when you're not consciously paying attention. A cluttered space reinforces scattered energy. A chaotic schedule reinforces disorganization. Draining relationships reinforce self-neglect. Nothing shapes behavior faster than the environment you return to every day. Upgrading your environment isn't about luxury or aesthetics. It's about alignment. It's about building a world that reflects the life you're choosing instead of the life you're leaving behind. Your environment acts like a mirror. It shows you what you prioritize, what you tolerate, and what you avoid dealing with. When that mirror reflects the old version of you, through habits, objects, routines, and influences that belong to your past, you remain tied to an identity you're trying to outgrow. But when the mirror reflects clarity, intention, and discipline, your mind adapts to match. Small changes in your surroundings can shift your behavior more effectively than relying on motivation alone. Structure breeds strength, and strength allows transformation to become sustainable instead of temporary. Upgrading your environment begins with removing what no longer belongs to your future. Physical clutter is often emotional clutter in disguise. Objects you keep out of guilt, memories that no longer empower you, items tied to outdated habits. All of these hold you in place. When you clear space, you create room for new routines and new energy. Every drawer you organize, every unnecessary item you release, every surface you simplify signals to your mind that you are preparing for a different chapter. The act of clearing becomes a declaration that you are done carrying what no longer serves you. The digital world you inhabit is also part of your environment. Your phone, your feeds, your inbox, and your notifications influence your identity as much as your physical space does. If your digital environment is filled with noise, your mind becomes restless. If it's filled with negativity, your thoughts become heavy. If it's filled with distractions, your attention becomes fragmented. Upgrading your digital environment means curating what enters your mind. It means choosing content that aligns with your growth, removing sources that drain your focus, and creating boundaries that protect your mental clarity. When your digital world becomes intentional, your thoughts become sharper. People are one of the strongest elements of your environment. Some individuals uplift you, challenge you, and expand your perspective. Others keep you anchored to patterns you're trying to escape. You don't need to cut everyone off. You simply need to adjust proximity. Draw closer to those who reinforce your growth and create distance from those who diminish it. Transformation becomes much easier when you surround yourself with people who reflect your desired identity rather than your past limitations. Their energy influences your standard. Their mindset influences your decisions. Their habits influence your own behavior. The right people make growth feel natural instead of forced. Another powerful way to upgrade your environment is to create designated spaces that support your new habits. A corner for reading, a spot for journaling, a space for work, a place for reflection. When your environment contains areas that anchor your routines, you eliminate friction and increase consistency. The mind loves cues, and physical spaces act as reminders. When you enter that space, your mind knows exactly what to do. This kind of structure strengthens discipline without relying on willpower. It turns your environment into an ally rather than an obstacle. Your environment also includes the sounds, scents, and atmosphere around you. Subtle details influence mood and behavior more than most people realize. Soft lighting encourages calm. Fresh air improves clarity. Clean surroundings increase focus. Even a simple shift, like opening a window, playing calming background noise, or lighting something that brings comfort, can make your mind feel more grounded. These small improvements accumulate and create a sense of inner stability. When your environment feels peaceful, your thoughts slow down. When your thoughts slow down, your decisions improve. Upgrading your environment isn't limited to what you remove or reorganize. It also includes what you intentionally add. Introduce elements that inspire you. Surround yourself with reminders of your goals, quotes that reinforce your values, or objects that spark motivation. Add tools that support productivity, habits that encourage self-care, and systems that simplify daily responsibilities. Transformation becomes far easier when your environment helps you stay aligned rather than constantly working against you. The greatest upgrades often come from establishing systems within your environment. Systems create reliability. They ensure that tasks get done, routines stay consistent, and decisions become easier. When the environment is structured, your mind doesn't waste energy thinking about what needs to be done next. Instead, it flows through habits naturally. Systems may be simple, like a nightly reset, a weekly review, or a designated time for deep work, but they compound over time. They turn discipline into rhythm and rhythm into identity. Even the environment inside your mind matters. The thoughts you allow, the emotional atmosphere you maintain, and the internal dialogue you strengthen all contribute to the conditions you operate in. You may live in a peaceful space physically, but if your inner environment is filled with chaos, you'll feel unbalanced. Upgrading your inner environment means choosing thoughts that steady you, rejecting narratives that weaken you, and cultivating mental habits that keep you grounded. Combine an elevated inner environment with an elevated outer environment, and your identity becomes nearly impossible to disrupt. As you reshape your environment, you'll notice your behavior shifting without forcing it. You begin moving with more intention. You feel more in control of your day. You recover faster from setbacks. You stay aligned with your goals even when motivation fluctuates. The environment becomes a silent partner in your transformation, reinforcing new habits until they become second nature. What once required effort turns into your default mode of living. Every change you make to your surroundings sends a message to your identity. It tells you that you're choosing growth over comfort. It tells you that your future matters more than old routines. It tells you that you are deserving of a space that reflects your potential. The more you upgrade your environment, the more convincingly your identity shifts. Eventually, you start to feel uneasy returning to any version of yourself that doesn't match your upgraded surroundings. This is how environment shapes identity, quietly, steadily, persistently. It becomes impossible to stay the same person when everything around you is designed to support who you're becoming. You rise to meet the standards set by your surroundings. You align with the energy you've intentionally created. You move through life with greater clarity because your environment no longer pulls you backward. When you upgrade the world around you, you upgrade the world within you. And once both worlds match the identity you're building, transformation becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Number 9. Practice bold actions to expand confidence. Bold action is the catalyst that forces your potential out of hiding and into movement. Confidence doesn't grow in silence or in planning alone. It grows through decisive steps that stretch your limits and challenge the assumptions you've been living under. Every time you break through hesitation, you create a new version of yourself, one that trusts personal capability more than internal doubt. The mind adapts to what you repeatedly do, so the moment you begin behaving with courage, it starts seeing you as someone who naturally handles challenges, embraces opportunities, and acts even when the outcome feels uncertain. This shift is the beginning of real expansion, because confidence isn't built by understanding boldness, but by practicing it through deliberate and consistent choices. Bold action doesn't require recklessness, perfection, or massive risk. It asks for one thing: movement that stretches you beyond your current comfort range. That could mean speaking when you usually stay quiet, starting a project you've postponed, finishing a task you feared failing at, or initiating conversations that matter. Every one of these is a small rebellion against the patterns that kept you shrinking. When you take these actions intentionally, you teach your nervous system that discomfort is not danger. It is a sign that you are entering territory where growth happens. The more you experience this, the more your fear threshold rises, and you begin welcoming challenges that once felt overwhelming. To practice boldness effectively, you need to create a rhythm of daily courage. Not occasional bravery, not rare moments of daring, but a steady flow of decisions that push you forward. Start by identifying the situations you usually avoid, those moments where hesitation speaks louder than intention. These are clues. They reveal where your growth is waiting. Bold action becomes easier when you understand the very places where you've been unconsciously holding yourself back. Once you identify them, choose one small step you can take today that disrupts the pattern. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It simply has to be different from your usual response. Taking bold action also means giving yourself permission to be imperfect. Many people never step into new possibilities because they obsess over doing everything flawlessly. That mindset traps your potential. Boldness thrives when you embrace experimentation, trying, adjusting, learning, correcting. Each attempt becomes a piece of evidence that you are capable of handling unfamiliar territory. Even mistakes become useful, because they give you information you never gain by staying passive. The moment you stop demanding perfection from yourself, you free your energy to focus on progress instead of fear. True confidence expands when bold action becomes a personal standard rather than a rare event. To reach that level, you must dissolve the internal stories telling you that bold choices are for other people, people who are stronger, smarter, more gifted, more supported, or more experienced. Those narratives are illusions created by long-term self-protection habits. Every time you choose courage in spite of them, you weaken their influence. Every step taken in uncertainty rewires your identity into someone who acts rather than someone who only plans. Confidence then becomes a natural outcome rather than a forced effort. Practicing boldness also requires recognizing the difference between danger and discomfort. Most hesitation arises not because something is truly risky, but because the mind exaggerates the emotional cost. It warns you of embarrassment, rejection, judgment, or failure, as if they were threats to your survival. Once you realize these reactions are simply mental predictions, not facts, you can consciously override them. Take the leap anyway. You will discover that the things you feared most rarely come true, and even when they do, you are far more resilient than you assumed. Each time you notice this, your courage strengthens, making the next action easier. One powerful method to increase boldness is to decide based on your future self rather than your current fear. Ask yourself what the version of you with unwavering confidence would do in this moment. Then commit to acting exactly that way. This breaks the pattern of letting fear direct your choices. You allow your desired identity to guide your behavior instead. Over time, your actions align with the person you want to become, and that identity becomes authentic, not aspirational. The more you practice this, the more natural bold decisions feel. Another way to expand confidence is to create momentum through small wins. Take micro actions daily. Send a message, make a call, complete a task, express a need, set a boundary, submit a project, take initiative, or initiate a conversation you've been avoiding. Each win compounds. Within days, the accumulation of small brave actions creates a noticeable shift in your internal state. You feel more capable, more willing, more energized. Momentum becomes your ally. Fear becomes quieter because action is now your default response. To sustain boldness, you must also build tolerance for emotional intensity. Courage does not erase nervousness. It transforms your relationship with it. Feel the heartbeat. the tension, the uncertainty, and take action anyway. With repetition, the sensations lose their power. You stop interpreting them as signs you should retreat, and instead recognize them as indicators that you are expanding into a bigger version of yourself. This is how emotional resilience forms, through consistent exposure to meaningful challenges chosen by you, not imposed by life. Bold action also benefits from reflection. After each courageous step, take a moment to acknowledge what you did. Notice the ways the situation felt easier than expected, or how capable you were despite the discomfort. Celebrate your follow-through. This reinforcement helps your mind internalize that you are becoming someone who acts decisively. Over time, taking bold steps becomes a habit rather than a forced effort. Your confidence expands not through luck or inspiration, but through evidence you created with your own action. To continue growing, deliberately choose increasing levels of challenge. What felt bold last week may feel comfortable now. This is a sign to elevate your expectations. Seek opportunities that demand more of your courage, bigger projects, deeper conversations, more visible leadership, stronger boundaries, or greater self-expression. As you stretch your limits consistently, you unlock strength you never accessed before. Confidence becomes a natural state because you repeatedly experience yourself as someone capable of meeting challenges head-on. Ultimately, bold action is not about fearlessness. It is about moving forward despite uncertainty. It is about refusing to shrink in the face of discomfort. It is about choosing expansion over safety, growth over familiarity, and courage over convenience. Confidence grows through motion, through the fire of real-world experience, not through imagined scenarios in your mind. The more you act boldly, the more life opens in ways that were once invisible to you, and soon, what once felt intimidating becomes your new baseline for what you believe you can do. Number 10. Track progress to reinforce personal evolution. Tracking your progress is the quiet engine behind transformation, the part of reinvention that turns scattered effort into undeniable evolution. When you begin documenting your growth, something shifts inside you. You stop guessing where you stand and start seeing clear evidence of how far you've come. This record becomes a mirror, one that reflects your movement, your discipline, your emerging identity. It grounds your journey in reality, not negative. Instead of hoping change is happening, you can observe it unfolding, step by step. This simple act creates momentum, because the mind becomes more willing to continue when it has proof that its efforts are working. Progress tracking turns your transformation into something visible and measurable, making it nearly impossible to deny the strength you're building. At the start, tracking may feel unnecessary, but it quickly becomes the structure that stabilizes your new habits. Reinvention often requires leaving behind old patterns that once felt familiar. When you're stepping into behaviors you've never practiced consistently, it's easy to feel lost or uncertain about whether your actions are creating real results. This is where documentation becomes essential. You capture the small improvements, the subtle shifts, the quiet victories that are easy to overlook in the moment. Every note, every check mark, every written reflection becomes part of a living archive of your growth. You create a timeline of becoming, one that reminds you that change is happening even on days when progress feels slow. As you track your evolution, your awareness expands. You start noticing which behaviors give you energy and which drain your motivation. You become more conscious of the choices that move you forward and the ones that pull you backward. This awareness becomes power. Instead of repeating old mistakes, you begin recognizing patterns early, adjusting your actions before they derail your progress. Over time, you start making decisions that align with who you're becoming rather than who you used to be. This shift happens naturally because your tracking system continually reconnects you with your goals and your growth. One of the greatest benefits of tracking progress is the way it strengthens your relationship with consistency. Many people underestimate how much power consistency holds in personal evolution. The problem is that consistency is difficult when results aren't immediately visible. But when you document each step, your perspective changes. Suddenly, you see that even the smallest actions accumulate. You watch your past efforts stacking on top of one another like building blocks. This accumulation fuels your commitment. You realize that missing a day doesn't just interrupt a routine. It interrupts a chain of progress that you've worked hard to create. Tracking becomes accountability to yourself, not pressure from the outside world. Over time, the process of tracking becomes a practice of self-respect. Every entry you make, whether it's a line in a journal, a note on your phone, or a mark on a calendar, signals that your evolution matters. You prioritize your development because you understand that transformation doesn't happen through random bursts of effort. It happens through deliberate practice and repeatable steps. When you show up to track your growth, you reaffirm that you are worth the effort. This builds a deeper sense of pride in who you are becoming, reinforcing the belief that change is possible and sustainable. Tracking progress also helps you maintain clarity. Reinvention can be overwhelming when you're focusing on too many changes at once. But a well-structured tracking process simplifies everything. You can separate long-term objectives from daily habits, emotional improvements from behavioral shifts, internal upgrades from external achievements. This clarity helps you avoid feeling scattered or discouraged. You gain the ability to evaluate your journey with honesty, without judgment, and with a mindset that encourages continued growth. As clarity increases, your path becomes easier to follow, because you know exactly where you are and what still needs your attention. Another powerful effect of tracking is the way it deepens self-awareness. When you write about your progress, you begin to understand your motivations, your fears, your triggers, and your strengths. You discover why you avoid certain actions and why others feel natural. You learn what environments help you grow and which ones sabotage your progress. This level of insight puts you in control of your reinvention. You're no longer reacting blindly to your emotions or circumstances. You're making choices from a place of understanding. The more you track, the more you discover, and the more you discover, the stronger your evolution becomes. A key part of tracking progress is celebrating milestones. These celebrations don't need to be extravagant. They simply need to be intentional. When you acknowledge a milestone, you reinforce your growth in a powerful way. You remind your mind that your efforts matter. You strengthen your internal reward system, making it more likely that you'll continue taking positive action. Celebration becomes an emotional anchor that keeps you motivated, especially on days when progress feels slow or invisible. These small recognitions compound your confidence and make your transformation feel alive. As the days pass, the documentation of your journey starts telling a story of resilience, determination, and continuous evolution. This story becomes your evidence whenever doubt tries to creep in. You can look back and see how many obstacles you've overcome, how many habits you've built, how much emotional strength you've gained. You recognize that reinvention is not just an idea or intention. It's a lived experience supported by dozens of small steps you've consciously taken. This realization becomes fuel. It strengthens your belief in your path and motivates you to keep moving forward, even when challenges arise. Tracking progress also prepares you for future growth. Once you develop this habit, you can use the same system to evolve in any area of life: health, mindset, career, relationships, or creativity. You've built a structure you can apply repeatedly. Reinvention becomes less intimidating because you know exactly how to approach it. You no longer rely on motivation alone. You rely on structure, awareness, reflection, and evidence. This makes growth sustainable, predictable, and empowering. Most importantly, tracking reinforces your identity as someone who evolves intentionally. You no longer hope to change, you expect to. You no longer wait for transformation, you create it. By documenting your journey, you shape the way you see yourself, and this identity becomes the foundation for every future achievement. You become the kind of person who grows on purpose, who transforms with awareness, and who continues expanding no matter where you start or what obstacles you face. Your progress log becomes more than notes. It becomes proof of your becoming. It becomes the record of a person who refused to stay the same, who showed up consistently, who committed to personal evolution with clarity, courage, and intention. And with every entry you make, your new self becomes stronger, more grounded, and undeniable.